Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Thunderstorms were expected, but as the weather worsened last night in Joplin, Missouri, people waited anxiously to see if the ominous piercing sound of the tornado sirens would go off. They did. At approximately 6 p.m., the town of about 50,000 heard the siren blast. They brace for the worst. Some of them got into walk-in freezers and stood there together. I want to show you a first-hand video shot at a convenience store inside the freezer. It's dark, but you have to listen to the people inside. This is as the storm starts to rip through. I noticed as I listened to this audio that there are two different reactions. We'll talk about them a little later on in the program, but see if you can hear the two different kind of reactions. Listen.
I love you. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Heavenly Father. Thank you, Jesus. Yes.
Okay. It is amazing audio. Now, this is the deadliest tornado in about 60 years. 75% of the town is gone. 116 people now confirmed dead, with the count still expected to rise. The devastation goes on for miles and miles. Everything from homes to hospitals crushed. Shortly after the storm, the Weather Channel was on the scene. Watch this.
If you take a look here at this neighborhood, all I can say is it looks very reminiscent of what we saw last month in, in Tuscaloosa.
The devastation is truly amazing, yet the devastation is not the story. It's what's happening after the devastation. The volunteers are showing up, not FEMA, volunteers, just people who survived, people from the other town, people in a neighborhood that the tornado skipped over, you name it. They showed up and they're helping. They have been now scouring the wreckage, just trying to account for every home and every family, looking for any survivors who might be trapped or hurt. It is amazing to see the outpouring of help, but it is not shocking because we're Americans. This is what we do best. You can fundamentally change our laws, but you can never fundamentally change the American spirit. It's in our DNA. When trouble comes, we help. We all want to believe that, and we all want to do that. But should we be prepared to help? Do we even know enough to help? The question I want you to ask yourself on tonight's program is, in the middle of the storm, if you are trapped inside a freezer, which person are you? The person that says, "Oh dear God," and is panicking and freaking out? Or the other person, the one that says, "We're all going to be good. We're good. We're good. Just hang on." Tonight, I want you to decide, who are you? Well, hello. I want you to think about what we have going on in the world. Japan has been destroyed by earthquakes and a tsunami. Remember, Japan was a country that was on, I think it was the World Bank or the IMF chart, said it won't survive if it's hit by any major catastrophe. It was the IMF, Tiffany. They said they'll never survive. Never survive. That was before the earthquakes and the tsunami. Mississippi, the floods, the Texas wildfires. We have a devastating tornado in Missouri. A volcano over the weekend in Iceland went off. We have the Middle East absolutely on fire. Last week, our government has turned against Israel. Now, besides thinking, oh, crap, what else springs to mind? Does anything spring to mind? Is there anything sensible besides, holy cow, I hope somebody's fixing all of this stuff? Is there anything that comes to mind? Because I think we have a choice. We can ignore it. We can wait for somebody else to fix it. We can go to the polls vote for somebody. Have you seen anybody you like yet? Or you could prepare to be the change you seek. Prepare to be self-reliant. Tonight I want to talk to you a little bit about two books. This one and this one. One is being endorsed by the NEA, telling kids, you should read this. One leads to revolution. Well, actually, they both lead to revolution. But one you cannot read in school. In fact, one of these, I'll give you a story later on in the program, a teacher is being fired for reading it in private in school. One of these you can read, one of them you cannot. We've talked a lot about this book. This is the one that's being pushed by the NEA. This one, but this one is, you can look at it any way you want. I don't really care. But it has a lot of fascinating history in it. I was reading this weekend about one of Isaac's favorite sons, Joseph. And Joseph is the one, I think they did a movie and he was in a Technicolor Dreamcoat or something, I don't know. Let me start in, after he's taken by his brothers, and then he's sold into slavery, and he ends up in a prison in Egypt. And Pharaoh has some really weird dreams. He has a dream, the first dream, he has a dream of 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows. Raphael, who usually does our artwork, was off for the day, so I did the cows. But this is the fat cows and the skinny cows. And he's bothered by it. And the second dream he has is really healthy grains and corns and really sick grains and corn, 7 of them. And the skinny cow eats the fat cow, and the skinny corn eats the good corn. And he can't figure out. He's like, what the heck does that, man, I got to stop eating that stuff. It's like kicking back, you know what I'm saying? Got some hot pudding, some gas, and those dreams. So somebody says, you know what, I met this guy when I was in prison, but that's a different story, I didn't put it on my resume. You should talk to him. So he brings him in, and Joseph tells the story to the Pharaoh. He says, well, this is what it means. He says, there are going to be 7 years of fat. There are going to be 7 years where you're going to live like Americans, but that's a different story. That's in the future. Then there's going to be 7 years where you live like, well, Egypt. Same thing with the corn. It's the same story. Well, the Pharaoh is listening to this guy who, I mean, he's been in prison now forever. He's got a smell and, I mean, like have vomit all over him and stuff. And the Pharaoh's like, you are a genius. That's exactly what it means. Got it. The famine strikes. All of the known places in the world where there was starvation, Egypt was not one. They all flocked to Egypt. Egypt was the only place that had any food. Why? I'll get back to Joseph in a second. But I want to go here first. We know that Joseph lived. I mean, this may or may not be his tomb, but they think that's his tomb. This is actually in the West Bank. So we know the guy existed. By the way, this is the place. A 24-year-old father of 4 was shot and killed just a few weeks ago. He was on his way just to view the tomb with a group of people who wanted to pray at the tomb when the Palestinian Authority opened fire on the group. And he died. Okay. So, we know that he lived. That's important because we know history. History repeats itself. If you don't pay attention, history repeats itself. So we know that famines happen. And we also know, if we know history on famines, that they happen. And famines have consequences. That's important. Because they're not just reserved for, you know, the Bible or Saul Alinsky. They could happen at any time. Most people don't know, or they forgot. I don't think I was ever taught this in school. Did you know that one of the main factors in the French Revolution was famine? Some historians believe that a massive volcano erupted in Iceland and eventually the ashes traveled to Europe and destroyed the crops. People were starving in Europe. Well, there's no easier way to get the bottom to rise up than when they're hungry. Jobless, well, that's one thing. jobless and hungry. Oh, now we have the seeds to really change things. By the way, in totally unrelated news, I know we were watching Joplin today, but did you see that there was a massive volcano eruption in Iceland over the weekend? Isn't that the second time this has happened in, I don't know, last year? So now let me bring you back to Joplin, Missouri, the Midwest. We have all of this destruction. But has anybody talked about the millions of acres of crops that have been destroyed? Some estimates have it as high as 2.5 million acres of farmland that has been flooded. Now that's about the size of the entire state of Connecticut. A farm that size being wiped out. In the midst of the craziness of all, I saw pictures, and this is from the Mississippi. I love this guy. I celebrated this guy. I thought this was the best house ever, and I'm like, boy, did that guy luck out. And then I realized he doesn't have a driveway, so I think he made it himself. Here's a guy who made levees himself. People have built their own levees around their houses. They're not going to be victims. They're not going to be standing with a sign on the roof saying, help me, help me. I love self-reliance. People that say, I'm not going to be a victim. I can do something about it. Now, some farmers in Missouri didn't have much of a choice, and one group of farmers in one town, a levee was intentionally blown up to ease the Mississippi River flooding, threatening the town of Cairo, Illinois. Don't talk to me about George Bush blowing up the levees. This president actually did in Illinois. The result, 200 square miles of Missouri farmland has been wrecked. Fertile topsoil has been washed away, costing about $100 million this year alone. Now, according to the Missouri Farm Bureau, it says that some farmers are going to take a generation to recover. Also, in Missouri, back to the tornadoes. We are focusing, as we should, on the loss of lives. But while we're doing that, we haven't heard of the destroyed farmland there. We haven't even thought about the economy and the impact on the economy. We haven't thought of that or talked about it with Texas. Texas has been ravaged by fires. April wildfires caused an estimated $20.4 million in farm losses alone, destroying the fences, the buildings, the grazing pastures. Cattle have been killed. The reason why I point all of this out is because Pharaoh didn't have a dream. Our Pharaoh had the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, I mean, even me. I mean, I don't expect him to believe me, but everybody's warning about the rising cost of food and the possible shortages that are coming. And now we have all of these natural disasters. We should follow the money here. I recommend the president follow the money. I read a story this weekend about the latest people to warn about a coming food crisis. They're hedge fund managers. Now, these guys are investing in and buying up farmland all around the world. Why? Because many of them believe, quote, productive agricultural land with water on site, as it's going to be, very valuable in the future. Okay. So we have warnings. We have warnings. We also have history that famines happen. We have the history that famines have consequences. The revolution in Europe in the 1700s. We also have glaring evidence that our food supply globally is under threat. That's why the president sent all of that grain last week in that speech, sent all of that grain from us to Egypt. We even have Al Gore. I mean, if you listen to Al Gore, oh, it's our SUVs, and they're all going to, you know, okay. But we also have our own government adding to this. Flooding, blowing up the levees and burning of our corn for fuel. So we have that as well. Then we have inflation due to what our government is doing there, which causes food prices to go up. He doesn't have a crazy dream about fat and skinny cows. The president doesn't have this. He just has all of the experts in the world saying that it's coming. But what's the difference between the two besides one didn't have the crazy dream? Pharaoh actually acted on this. What was the very first thing that the Pharaoh did when the guy with vomit on him said, I gotta tell you, I know what it is? What happened? When Joseph explained it, Pharaoh said, that is exactly right. You know what? You're in charge. You're going to store all the food. Okay? He started storing food. Now, can you imagine? I mean, it was the Pharaoh, so, I mean, if you complained, I guess he could have just thrown you in between. I saw the movie. So, wait, that's an old woman between the... So there's not a lot of complaining there, but people had to have said, I mean, what is he doing? There's plenty of food going around. I mean, again, we're living like Americans, you know what I'm saying? Can't happen to Egypt. Pharaoh, why are you hoarding it all? Because you had a crazy acid trip and dreams about fat and skinny cows? That was based on a dream and the interpretation from a guy who you dragged out of a prison cell. But the Pharaoh believed it. And even as evil as he was, he acted either to save his own throne or to save his people by storing up food. He knew famines happen and famines have consequences. Store up food. So with all of the signs that are pointing towards access to food becoming more difficult, what is our president and his minions doing? They're not only ignoring all of the warning signs, failing to tell people to prepare, but they also take it a step further and they mock those who are preparing. Is anyone mocking the people in Joplin, Missouri, who are walking around today handing out maybe extra water bottles that they had, or using extra food to help feed neighbors? I contend if the president and this administration, if they're not worried about extremists in the Middle East. I mean, they don't even think they're existing. They're not warning about a coming economic and food shortage problem. They're not worried about our border. They're not worried about anything, really. What is it that they are warning you about? I'm not kidding you. This is the CDC website. A zombie attack. Preparedness 101, zombie apocalypse. I don't know if we can wear our superhero unemployment capes while we're fighting the zombies, but if the zombies showed up, government's going to be prepared. So we're prepared for zombies. We're also prepared for the fundamental transformation of the financial system. We're prepared for new financial regulations. We're prepared, believe it or not, for the 2012 election. You bet they are, where all the old evil Republicans are wheeling old ladies off of a cliff. But do you believe or feel as though we are prepared for any kind of food shortage? Is there anyone that is talking about famines happen, even if it's not here? What will it do to your food cost? Is anyone saying, you know, guys, just let's be like our grandparents. Let's have some extra food on the shelves. Is anybody really prepared for unemployment? Is anybody prepared for, what does he say, the energy prices will necessarily skyrocket? How about civil unrest? We've got the left planning it. We've shown it to you on this program. Are we prepared? By the way, on a completely unrelated note, the president brushed off the War Powers Act deadline expiring because he said the Libyan military mission doesn't apply to that. Excuse me? If you look at every action from this administration, from that War Powers Act to everything he's done, including the speech slamming Israel, our only stable ally in the Middle East, and then lifting up the guy in Tunisia who set himself on fire as the equivalent to Rosa Parks, you have to ask yourself, is this president and this administration, are their actions stabilizing us or destabilizing us? You're going to have to decide that, but the answer to me seems pretty clear. And as things become more unstable around the world, we should move to be more prepared. If the government doesn't do it, you know what I would love to see? I would love to see a town that is so prepared that when the FEMA trucks come in because something like this happened, they stand and say, excuse me, turn your cars around, we don't need you. Thank you. If you're more prepared, what's the worst that can happen? You're prepared and nothing happens, great, everybody wins. I'm not sure anymore why that's mocked, other than a pure political agenda, and a dangerous one at that. Learn from history. Be self-reliant. A flood is coming, a volcano could hit, a tornado, a financial tsunami, or just a simple job loss of you or your neighbor. Why wouldn't you want to be prepared? Why wouldn't you want to build a dike around your house? Why wouldn't you want to be the person that can go and help someone else if they are struggling? And if you can't answer that question, then I ask you to follow the money and ask yourself, if the hedge fund managers, the ones who, according to the White House, are so powerful, they're manipulating money, but so powerful that no one will even bring up regulating that market, if those guys are buying up farmland with water on it because what they see is coming, if they're not ignoring it, but you are, you have to ask yourself, why? And which one am I when the storm comes? The one comforting people or the one screaming in panic? Back in a minute. I announced a date for my trip to Jerusalem for Restoring Courage. It is 8/24, August 24th. It will be at the southern steps of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And there'll be 2 other events happening that week between the 21st and 24th. It is truly going to be I think, a life-altering week. And if you'd like to go, or if you'd like to organize an event, kind of like we did on the 912 Project where people got together, please go to glennbeck.com for all of the details. Do that now. It's right around the corner. Now, you're never going to believe this, but people in Egypt are still really hacked off, which is so weird because everybody in the media said, oh, the Arab Spring, it's coming through, and now the Egyptians are going to frolic around in the plush fields of freedom. It's going to be great. Yeah, no, didn't happen. Now there's a new revolution that is just beginning in Egypt. They are mad, apparently, at all of the people at Facebook and Google because nothing is better. In fact, in many ways, it's worse. Now, that's quite a shocker, except, you know, to everybody in this audience, some historians and people without a political agenda, but who's counting here? I'd like you to look towards the future a little bit, and I want you to play a little game called Thinking It Through and see how this ends for America. Let's say you're a person in Egypt, and you believed that the revolution was all natural, you know what I mean? It's just, I'm on the internet. And then it starts to happen. And then Facebook and guys from Google's, they all start standing up and going, we created this whole thing. And then the President of the United States gives them credit and encourages more revolutions that lead to the same crappy situation that they're in. Oh, and then he goes and he hires some of those guys and puts them in. And then I know. Then we learned through WikiLeaks that the White House was helping direct it from behind the scenes. Okay, so now here you are. You thought you were in control of your life, and you hated the American administration in the first place, and now you're worse off than you were before. How much more do you love America? Huh? Come on, give me a big hug. They already loved us so much before.
Because we hate you. We hate American.
You hate us?
Yes, I hate you, and I hate you.
Why do you hate us?
You are not good person. Go to any place more, please. Go to any place with us. You are not with us.
Okay, I was always hoping that he just meant that they don't hate us, but I think he means hate. What could possibly go wrong now? May I go back to the original board that was relentlessly mocked by the media? And now that everybody's just ignoring the fact that they were completely wrong. You should look at this board because it shows the future. I said at the time they would work against Israel. I said that it would spill over into Europe. And the pipe-smoking elitists said, no, don't listen to that man, it's poppycock. Europeans are so much more civilized, you know? Yeah. Has anybody in the media bothered to check on the protests in Spain? If you remember the map, I specifically pointed out Spain so long ago. Watch. There I am, caliphate, and I was made fun relentlessly. Oh, gee, no, you can't do that. It's odd, because here they are in revolution in Spain, and there's me saying that, being mocked. Tens of thousands in the street. Something extremely uncommon in Spain, 21% unemployment. That's what's really starting to do it. I'm sure it didn't take a lot of arm twisting from the union thugs to get them into the streets. Greece now is 2 months away from running out of cash, and the protest this weekend started to move to Italy, where Italian revolution is a trend on Twitter. Greece, Italy, and Spain. By the way, just after the uprisings in Tunisia, we warned you 5,000 Tunisian refugees fled in boats to Italy. Then this weekend, I saw a piece on Bloomberg, where Neil Ferguson, a historian and economist, said this about Europe. Listen carefully.
the Eurozone has become a kind of government-killing machine, and that most governments right now who have been incumbent over the years of the financial crisis are being punished.
Yeah. Listen to the whole thing, because it's spooky. It is what I wrote on this board, that it would sweep the Middle East, it would destabilize Europe, and then the rest of the world. The governments are becoming government-eating machines. I believe that's why the president made his suggestions on Israel. I think that's why he is moving in the way he is. He has suggested people get more involved in the Arab uprisings, which are clearly not in the people's best interests. Not that Mubarak was, but that wasn't a good solution. The movement to fundamentally transform the world must destroy everything. It must make everything ungovernable. It must eat the current governments. Are these things all happenstance? Are they all coincidence that they're all happening? And how the hell did I get that right? How? What role do you and me, what do we play in the chaos and the things that this next president, if it is him, can he fix it? Can the next president do it? Or is this bigger? Is this bigger than the 2012 election? And if it is, what's the answer? Coming up. To fundamentally transform a country, you have to fundamentally transform its people. So what kind of people are we? In times of crisis, we usually tend to find out. We had such a crisis when a massive tornado hit Joplin, Missouri this weekend, a tornado that destroyed much of the town. It has now killed 116 people. I want to show you again what we showed you at the top of the hour. Amazing video taken from a group of people that took refuge in a walk-in freezer. Because of the storm, you can't see the video, but the audio is clear. Isaac Duncan from Joplin posted this on his YouTube account. I want you to listen carefully. Is it the people screaming?
I love you. Jesus. Heavenly Father.
Now, some people were screaming. Others were calling out for Jesus. Some were taking control of the situation, calm everybody down. I like the guy who sounded like, you know, every night at my house when I was a drunk, I love you, man. I just love all you guys. One guy you hear in that video, I think, is true courage under fire. He is the shining character that is going through, and that is the guy saying, we're all okay. We're all going to make it. This, I believe, is what it's going to take to save our country in the face of all the crises pressing down on our world right now. The spirit of banding together and being a leader in those situations, saying, you're all right, helping each other, turning to God. People are on the ground in Joplin, Missouri, are helping now however they can, trying to help. It's interesting to me. Listen, see if you can find the federal agency here. We spoke to Pastor Cliff Mansley from the New Creation Church in Joplin, Missouri. Now, this is a church that's only 3.5 years old. They have 150 members. Already over 100 of his members are volunteering. The pastor himself has helped pull people from the rubble. He said they are in desperate need for lithium-ion battery power tools. I mean, not that he's a, power tool snob, but they last longer when you're out on the job, or so they tell me. At College Heights Christian Church, hundreds of volunteers have shown up offering to help. The church has been sending volunteers out all day in teams of 4 equipped with waters and bottles and tarps. And they are accepting donations, collecting non-perishable food items, and you can find out how to help by visiting their website at chcchurch.org. Southwest Missouri Conservative Group is organizing a relief effort. Their website is at meetup.com. Also, asamom.org is sending blankets, stuffed animals, and books for all of the kids. Care packages for moms with children. Can you imagine how frightened the children are? Go to their website, asamom.org, for more information. I tell you these things because the first ones always on the scene are the neighbors and the churches, not the federal government. So the decision you have to make is, why would we be weakening our neighbors, our self-reliance, and our churches, while at the same time making our federal government stronger? And then you ask yourself this question: who am I if I'm locked in that freezer? Am I the person that stands around screaming or thinking to myself, oh, there's nothing we can do, we're all going to die? Or am I the one saying, come on, we're all okay, pull together, we're okay, and participate in restoring ourselves and restoring courage? Watching the border. The Mideast is on fire, and then there's a threat at an Arizona Dairy Queen. Late last week, 30-year-old homeless woman was arrested after she went into a Dairy Queen, ordered an ice cream, and then pulled a grenade out of her pocket. Police determined it was just a training grenade, so she couldn't have blown anything up. Oh, well, I feel so much better. We also have a woman pulling a sword in Louisville. It's a Pizza Hut there. 29-year-old started yelling at the employee and then threatened him with a sword. She, quote, began to raise it out of the sheath. I don't know if you get into my Pizza Hut with anything in a sheath. When her brother grabbed her and then locked the sword inside the car. How about the sister? But don't worry about these two women. No. The federal government is on the case. The real threat facing America, the terrorism of prayer. An assistant special education teacher in Brooklyn was fired over this. She claims she would pray in her class before or after students left the room, special ed. She read the Bible during lunch break, and she also led other teachers in a prayer group. The woman said she was teased by the principal and that, quote, he was aware that she and other Christians were praying to have demons removed from his spirit, but it wasn't working. That's what he would tell her. The woman, who is also disabled, also claims that he criticized her for not using the elevator. Or for using the elevator. He told her, you should take the stairs. Quote, why don't you just pray yourself up? Well, she's been punished. She was sent to the rubber room. That's where the teachers accused of misconduct, like fondling children, are sent away from the students. Sometimes in New York, they're there for years. Well, this teacher spent a few weeks there before she was fired. Oh, yeah, they got her out right away. Now she's suing the Department of Education and the school's principal, while her former union rep appeals her firing. Don't worry, America. The NEA, the Teachers Union, and the Department of Education are keeping your kids safe tonight from teachers praying about your kids while they're not in the room. Thank you, federal government. On Friday, on the radio program, I announced the date of Restoring Courage in Jerusalem and where it is. On 8/24, right there at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. I'm inviting the world to come, whether electronically or physically. Be there with me. To take a stand and to be who you were born to be. There is good and evil in the world. And I said to my staff this morning on the radio, I said, we have to start a new game show, good versus evil. And we'll just take calls from people who say, people beheading people, people saving the people who tried to blow them up or behead them, good or evil. I wonder how many Americans will know the difference. Do they even know what what good and evil is anymore? I contend, yes. Yes. Now, will people stand in their own communities, or even more so, stand in a war-torn area and take a risk just because they want to show the world and show their God? You're not going to bully me. And I know the difference between good and evil. And no matter what happens, I'm not going to change. We have to decide now, before things get crazy, who we are. I think we're already headed down this road. We're a divided country now. I feel a little like Michelle Obama. This is the first time I've ever been proud of my nation. Now, I've always been proud of my country, but I have never felt like we were a nation divided. About a year and a half ago, I started doing research on the Civil War, and I wanted to see how things were right before the Civil War, because I kind of wanted to be able to check the clock. If we start going this way, what does it look like before a Civil War starts? We're not there yet. Things right before the Civil War. I mean, there was one congressman that I think beat a senator almost to death in the well of the Senate. It was bad. So we're not there yet. But there are two different Americas that are starting to emerge. And it's really the difference between good and evil, I think. Or embracing good or evil, allowing ourselves to become something that we're not. I've been telling you about the Arizona curriculum that is teaching our kids to overthrow the government. It's as simple as that. Overthrowing. It is the most horrific curriculum I have ever read. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, the same school district that is raising these kids is now sending a director of student equity to a conference, believe it or not, headlined by the one and only Bill Ayers. Okay, so things are out of control in Arizona. But now I want to show you a couple of other scenes. Here we have, this first one over here is a Denny's fight. The women are fighting over syrup. The next one, women fighting on a New York City subway because one is eating spaghetti on the train and the other doesn't like it. There's women fighting in a gas station parking lot. They're celebrating after the fight. And then, of course, the horrible footage of the McDonald's beating, a beating of a woman so badly that she goes into a seizure. I just told you the story about a Dairy Queen where somebody walked in and had a fake grenade. Or, you know, the sword in Pizza Hut. I mean, when you go into these places, when you can't go into a Denny's and know that, you know, people aren't going to beat each other up over maple syrup, you have to ask yourself, what happened to us? Where is the America that I understand, where we're decent to each other? What's striking to me is one of these Americas is in the relative midst of plenty. And then you start to see the other America. I mean, one, all they have to do is ask for syrup, and they can get it. This one, you could ask for syrup all you want, you ain't going to get it. The other America is in the midst of devastation. Ask yourself tonight, which America do you want to live in? Believe it or not, I'd rather live in the one that has no mall, a crippled hospital, a city where there are no jobs, where my home is gone, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I'd rather live in that America if people behave the way Americans are supposed to behave, how we're expected to behave, decently to each other. We celebrated on this program how the Japanese behaved after the tsunami earthquake. More than 400 aftershocks destroyed their country. But now look at the Midwest. It is being done quietly, without any fuss. 116 people so far dead. Church in Joplin, Missouri, housing 40 people, giving them food and clothing, without any fuss. In a neighboring town, they're collecting food and hosting dinners for people who have lost everything. When you have this kind of devastation in your country, and you don't hear about it, it's because people are behaving like Americans. America, I urge you tonight to begin your process, your journey on being who you were meant to be, not the person we've all allowed ourselves to become. I have a couple of special shows coming up for you. First of all, on Friday, a crash course in everything you need to know about our founding fathers and how they represent faith, hope, and charity. And on Monday, Memorial Day, you remember the survivor mom from the fire that we showed you? Stephanie Nielsen, her whole family, all of her children, join us for the full hour. Set your DVR next Monday. From New York, good night, America. In the tsunami. Mississippi, the floods, the Texas wildfires. We have a devastating tornado in Missouri. A volcano over the weekend in Iceland went off. We have the Middle East absolutely on fire. Last week, our government has turned against Israel. Now, besides thinking, oh, crap, what else springs to mind? Does anything spring to mind? Is there anything sensible besides, holy cow, I hope somebody's fixing all of this stuff? Is there anything that comes to mind? Because I think we have a choice. We can ignore it. We can wait for somebody else to fix it. We can go to the polls and vote for somebody. Have you seen anybody you like yet? Or you could prepare to be the change you seek. Prepare to be self-reliant. Tonight I want to talk to you a little bit about two books. This one and this one. One is being endorsed by the NEA, telling kids, you should read this. One leads to revolution. Well, actually, they both lead to revolution. But one you cannot read in school. In fact, one of these, I'll give you a story later on in the program, a teacher is being fired for reading it in private in school. One of these you can read, one of them you cannot. Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Thunderstorms were expected, but as the weather worsened last night in Joplin, Missouri, people waited anxiously to see if the ominous piercing sound of the tornado sirens would go off. They did. At approximately 6 p.m., the town of about 50,000 heard the siren blast. They brace for the worst. Some of them got into walk-in freezers and stood there together. I want to show you a first-hand video shot at a convenience store inside the freezer. It's dark, but you have to listen to the people inside. This is as the storm starts to rip through. I noticed as I listened to this audio that there are two different reactions. We'll talk about them a little later on in the program, but see if you can hear the two different kind of reactions. Listen.
I love you. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Heavenly Father. Thank you, Jesus.
Okay. It is amazing audio. Now, this is the deadliest tornado. We've talked a lot about this book. This is the one that's being pushed by the NEA. This one, but this one is, you can look at it any way you want. I don't really care. But it has a lot of fascinating history in it. I was reading this weekend about one of Isaac's favorite sons, Joseph. And Joseph is the one, I think they did a movie and he was in a Technicolor Dreamcoat or something, I don't know. Let me start in, after he's taken by his brothers, and then he's sold into slavery, and he ends up in a prison in Egypt. And Pharaoh has some really weird dreams. He has a dream, the first dream, he has a dream of 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows. Raphael, who usually does our artwork, was off for the day, so I did the cows. But this is the fat cows and the skinny cows. And he's bothered by it. And the second dream he has is really healthy grains and corns and really sick grains and corn, 7 of them. And the skinny cow eats the fat cow, and the skinny corn eats the good corn. In about 60 years, 75% of the town is gone. 116 people now confirmed dead, with the count still expected to rise. The devastation goes on for miles and miles. Everything from homes to hospitals crushed. Shortly after the storm, the Weather Channel was on the scene. Watch this.
If you take a look here at this neighborhood, all I can say is it looks very reminiscent of what we saw last month in, in Tuscaloosa.
The devastation is truly amazing, yet the devastation is not the story. It's what's happening after the devastation. The volunteers are showing up, not FEMA, volunteers, just people who survived, people from the other town, people in a neighborhood that the tornado skipped over. You name it, they showed up and they're helping. They have been now scouring the wreckage, just trying to account for every home and every family, looking for any survivors who might be trapped or hurt. It is amazing to see the outpouring of help, but it is not shocking because we're Americans. This is what we do best. You can fundamentally change our laws, but you can never fundamentally change the American spirit. It's in our DNA. When trouble comes, we help. We all want to believe that, and we all want to do that. But should we be prepared to help? Do we even know enough to help? The question I want you to ask yourself on tonight's program is, in the middle of the storm, if you are trapped inside a freezer, which person are you? The person that says, "Oh dear God," and is panicking and freaking out? Or the other person, the one that says, "We're all going to be good. We're good. We're good. Just hang on." Tonight, I want you to decide, who are you? Well, hello. I want you to think about what we have going on in the world. Japan has been destroyed by earthquakes and a tsunami. Remember, Japan was a country that was on, I think it was the World Bank or the IMF chart, said it won't survive if it's hit by any major catastrophe. It was the IMF, Tiffany. They said they'll never survive. Never survive. That was before the earthquake.